G'day, welcome back. Here's the next video in my series on attacking motifs. Looking at a really fun one today with a bit of like a historical interest to it, the Alekhine's gun. So you can see the in the thumbnail there, I think we understand the Alekhine's gun. Two rooks and a queen lined up on a file with the queen at the back, providing a lot of pressure down the file, either pointing to pieces or allowing access to the enemy camp. And it got named after Alekhine. He wasn't the first person to play it. He played, I think I've got two games we can look at. So he played two pretty famous games, and he got the name attributed to him. I think partly because mainly the match between him and Nimzo from San Remo in 1930. I'm assuming that's the same San Remo as the bike race. Anyway. And you can see this. I always think of the gun as a cannon. There's some discussion about what type of gun it is. I always think of a cannon. That's supposed to be some sort of a Mons Meg type of gun or cannon, which is the way I always think about it because it's very big and very chunky. Let's have a look what we're going to go through today. I've done a bit of a summary there on the sort of the text. You can see we're just talking about what it is and how we find the positions, who's played it, and then a bit more. It's quite interesting in its own way. We'll be looking at Scoutfish again as we go through that. And then from that, how often does it occur? How often does it work? And does it work? How does it work? And I think how does it work is the main thing we're going to be quite interested in as we go forwards, right? That, it's direct pressure, it's X-ray pressure, it's a lack of space for the defender, Zugzwang for the defender, and you're able to creep in, and often the second week. So we'll just sort of go through that as it becomes apparent. Now there's the Edward Winter page on Alekhine's gun. By all means, give that a read. It's quite interesting. So chesshistory.com, Winter, blah, blah, blah. And I think the most interesting thing is supposedly Jeremy Silman, How to Reassess Your Chess in 1993, called it the Alekhine's gun. It's very strange because I grew up sort of understanding that was the name of it, right? So I'm not quite too sure. Obviously, it's maybe a bit of common knowledge before Silman wrote about it. Even Edward Winter's page on it is a little bit unclear about the use of that terminology. And here he sort of only goes through a few games. Kennedy-Mayet, which we have. And then there's a Carls-Rubinstein one. And then there's a few games, which I don't go through that one. Right, okay, so let's close that for the moment and just explain what I am going to do. Let's go to the first game. Go through it quite yet. And like here's Alekhine's gun. A little bit different. This one you can see that the black there's a gap in the lineup. There's a rook gap. Rook and queen. I think that's quite valid to view that as Alekhine's gun as long as there's no interposing pieces. So what I've done, as always, I mean, look, if you want to do this yourself, which I think you should do, Scoutfish, very useful, and I've used Scoutfish as we drag the code in front. This is the worst code in the world. Do not copy my code. But if you think of the way, how would we find the Alekhine's gun positions? Well, it can be on any file, so root through all the files, and then you can put the rook on a position. Now, I said the rook can be up to the 5th rank, and then the second rook has to be close to your home base, and the third piece, which is a queen, has to be the one at the back. So basically, I'm just doing a triple loop there. And then what I've allowed for is the distance between the queen and the rook can be 3. So it can be all packed or have one space. That's sort of another little feature. I mean, this is not scientifically correct, but we're just trying to find out a good set of the Alekhine's guns. And then we put that in a search for a subfen. It's a subfen search. Okay, so let's have a look at what that looks like when you run it. That's something else. Oh, okay. Let me just run it, and you can have a look at what it actually. Stop it there, right? So it generates that query. All these subfens, a list of subfens, which is the way it works. You search them all the time, and you can see the subfen means you just got to find those pieces. There can be other pieces on the board, and it still satisfies the condition. So this is, if you can read fens, that's 7 empty files by queen, 7 empty files followed by rook, 7 empty files followed by rook. So that's a black Alekhine's gun on the H file. Actually, with that earlier code, I had to flip it for black and white. So that's the black one, and then you can see I did the black and white one separately. Created 2 files. Okay, so that is the search we are doing, and out of the way. So I end up with 2 databases. You can see here the white gun 9,000 and the black gun 7,000. So we're starting to answer our questions. How often does it happen? Now, the way I make that is it's 15,000. That's about 5 million games. So 0.3% or so. So if you play 1,000 games, you'll encounter 2 or 3 of these games, right? So it's a pretty rare tactic. I mean, some of the other tactics are pretty rare, smothered bait and double bishop sacrifice. So as you come up with a big list, and you go through them, and you can see that the dates, the white players, Kizaritsky from the model game. And then what we have a look at very briefly here is you'll just bring up the statistics window. And what I found quite interesting, so in white games, you can see it's 61% winning. Yeah, so this thing doesn't work all the time. In fact, a lot of them are kind of pointless. So I think it's one thing got to bear in mind that actually has to be relevant. And then if I go across to the black one, I bring up statistics window. Now it's 44%. So it gives you a slight edge, right? So it's not a winning tactic by any means. I think you should just bear that in mind. And just the other thing I was saying, I mean, if it's there just for one move, maybe it's irrelevant. So the other thing you can throw in is how many moves does the Alekhine's gun has to appear before you rank it. And it's something who has played it the most. So let me bring back this big long list I had here. Double counting here because the CASA database, a lot of databases, they actually have games included multiply. So anyway, it's interesting. I included a couple of these games. Victor Korchnoi has the most. It's actually only about 10 games, but let's say there's double counting. Rosenthalis, Kamsky, Chabalo. Karpov is kind of well known for it. So it's quite interesting to see. Oh, actually, he should be there because Natalie Karpov has 8 and A Karpov has 10. So that's like 18 in total, so he'd be much higher up. Maybe it was a Karpov-Korchnoi thing. It's quite funny. And Bronstein. Yeah, anyway, if you played a lot of games chess, you'll have a lot of these in them, but there seems to be certain players who play even more than you would expect. So that's kind of who plays it. We have a look. So how often I've done that? How does it work? We'll go into that. The games will help us understand how it does it work and how often does it work. Yeah, not the strongest attacking motive we're going to look at. It's just really interesting, right? So let's now go have a look. I have got, I'm going to look at 12 games. The first one is Kennedy-Mayet, which is the one in the edited winter page. And I just wanted to say that Carl-Mayet, well-known player of the mid-19th century, and he was part of this group called the Berlin Pleiades, and he actually just seems to lose matches against everybody else, to be honest, but obviously he's a strong player. And here's the Berlin Pleiades, right? So 7 players. Hilgeier, I think most people have heard of him. Von der Lasser, anyway, this is just Von der Lasser, I think most people have heard of him. Carl-Mayet, Horwitz. So, yeah, 2 very strong players from that period, and just thought that was quite interesting. So I'm going to close that now, and we're going to say here's 12 games we're going to look at, and I think the message we're going to do is go through each of these. We have a look at how is this working, how does it help you win the game, and we'll sort of get an understanding of how the tactic works and whether you should build it in your own games. Because obviously it's quite a maneuvering structure. You have to spend a few moves to build it. So you have to those tempo. You have to make sure that it's worth doing, and you have to keep an eye on what your opponent is doing at the same time. By the time you get there, it might not be worthwhile. Without further ado, let's now get into these 12 games. Right, so this is when Mayet set it up as the classic Alekhine's gun from the black side. Now, this was actually Mayet lost the game in the end, not because of the Alekhine's gun. He made an endgame blunder later on. I mean, you can find his game database. The thing is, the Alekhine's gun is not winning in any sense, right? So that's something to bear in mind. And the question is why? Why not? Okay, well, it's about the pressure, right? So let's have a look. He's attacking that pawn 3 times, so we just we defended. Now 1, 2, 3 times defended. So you do now have a pin because you've got 3 attackers. The rook here would be weak, so that the pawn is pinned. But when you look at it, there's no breaks that black can do, because normally you might like the b pawn, but the b pawn can't get to b4 without being taken by a rook or a queen. So even if you played a6 and then b5 and then exchanged, the b4 square is so well covered, and black has that light squared bishop, so that's not going to help at all, right? So basically, pretty quickly, when white was expanding on the king, pretty quickly Mayet just gave up on it. It wasn't going to create any problems because he couldn't apply any extra pressure down the file. So that's why that one did not work. Okay, let's move quickly on to the next one, which is Schallop-Paulsen. Okay, so there's the move which sets it up. Now this one's different. Let's have a look. I'm sort of highlighting the fact that bishop is attacked 3 times. So it has to be defended 3 times. And on top of that, the rook behind means that the bishop can't move because the rook behind is not defended. So basically, now we've defended it 3 times. Now, this is one of those cases where a lack of space and tactics, because you're tied down, means that white wins. Actually, it's worth a tactical study just to see how it's broken in. Obviously, we can't apply any more pressure with pawns and things. The structure's all blocked. The winning move is, didn't play it straight away. It's a game continuation. You just took the pawn. Obviously, the rook behind is not protected enough. just go through this quickly. And we picked up the bishop. Just fell apart, too much pressure, and we broke through. But there was another line here which was interesting. Another way of holding was playing queen to c6. And this is where this other tactic came into play. We played knight to f5. So everything's pinned, so you just have to take the knight, otherwise you're losing. But if you take the knight, let's see what happens. Rook has to move. So rook f6 is the most logical one, hold the bishop, because if you drop the bishop back, if you rook e7, rook takes the bishop, and you're just losing. White has total dominance of the central file, probably pick up different pawns. Unfortunately, if you play rook to f6, that's all falling apart. I'll just show you the line because I put it in there. Takes. Checks on the back rank. Checks on g5. That queen e8 is given as the best move, which basically loses the queen. So you can see that other tactics. The second weakness was kingside weakness. So these are sort of the points I'm putting through. There's a second weakness, potential breakthrough, cramped, and the pin was stopping black from being able to maneuver effectively. Next game, Blackburn versus Rosenthal. Go to the position where it was set up. This is pretty good. I like this one. So once again, I'm showing you schematically what's going on. There's no indirect pin here, but we're just hitting that c-pawn 3 times. And the best way of defending it, the only way of saving it, is playing c6, which was played because now you've got 2 knights defending it, but obviously that exchange wouldn't necessarily help white, so he doesn't do it. But basically, that pawn is pinned down, and now the knights are tied down to holding the pawn. And you can see there's a potential bishop bounce, which will both pin that knight and just take it. And then the support for the pawn will start being reduced. So that's the white is doing. Black can't do a lot. Black continued, knight c8, which is one of the better moves. Once again, you don't need to sacrifice the exchange. Just maneuvering. This reminds me of some other games I've looked at where, if you've got a good position, there's no need to rush, right? So just got the bishop out of the way, knight out of the way, because those pieces weren't actually adding much pressure. But now the knight is maneuvering itself to b4, where it will be able to put extra pressure on the pawn, right? And black can't do anything. Okay, now we're attacking it 4 times. We could probably take it now, but I think white just improves his position. Black can do nothing. This is going to be a theme we'll see in the Alekhine games, where actually black cannot do much. Actually, what I was showing there is actually taking the knight off first was better. But so what the best move was to take the knight. And if you let's look at that continuation, obviously take back, and now we grab it. Check, another tactic, second weakness. And it's an easily, you might be a bit dubious about this, but it's +4, +5. Those central pawns just kind of white is winning. The way he did it was a bit more subdued because this was supporting the advance of the e pawn, which is a second weakness. Black's got all these pieces over here protecting the c pawn, so doesn't have much flexibility. He blocked it, but then we took off bishop c7, queen c7. Now we push pawn. Could take it. Variation, didn't have that in my code. Get a knight fork, take back, then there's this bishop's dropping. White will be a piece up. So black did not take it. He dropped his bishop back. Just look at how compressed and cramped black is. That's one big theme of Alekhine's gun. So actually, in some ways, the more the pieces are on the board, like in this position, too many pieces, cramped, lack of space. This one was less the direct pressure and X-ray pressure, just the fact that it did actually tie black down to 1 point, and then we've used a second weakness in the camp for a breakthrough. So now what happens? We grab the d-pawn, got to take back, and now we have capture the knight, push the pawn forwards. I was actually thinking that when you look at this position back here, it was also possible, infiltration moves are also possible to the 7th. That's Blackburne-Rosenthal. Carls-Rubinstein, I always like seeing if we can fit Rubinstein games in, obviously an amazing player. Right, okay, so this is where I found it quite interesting, right? So it's a different one. There's not so many pieces on the board, very, very locked pawn chain, not many places to break through. Rubinstein spent a few moves setting up the Alekhine's gun on the H file. It's quite interesting, and he's obviously pressuring that pawn 4 times. That pawn cannot be held, so it's a question of what white does in the interim. Now, he played queen a4, which is not supposed to be particularly clever. In fact, a4 is supposed to be sufficient. If we go through the lines with a4, let's say we grab the pawn here, then we just kind of ignore it, because we actually do have enough defense of this square, and dark squared bishop, you'd think, well, can't really do much there because we've got it covered with the bishop. So what it's actually suggesting is just to counterplay on the queen side, and then we'll break through the queen side and get some perpetual check or something. Let's see, just ignore it. Now white's actually got the advantage, because what's that pawn doing? Pawn can't do anything. Take, then we're perfectly happy, because now we're +7, right? So don't do that. So if we go back here, A4, just organize counterplay. So this is where white actually missed his chance to organize counterplay on the queen side, and just realized that he could hold here, because even though we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces attacking the pawn, well, the pawn's obviously going to drop, but then this square will be able to be held. Just get back what I mentioned in one of the earlier videos, that we've got enough control of this square, and pawn takes it. There's no harm at all. So let's go back to the game continuation, which is queen A4. So white's thinking the same idea, but he's done it the wrong way. Black's actually clever. He actually moved back so he can try and keep the white queen out of the queen side. And that's probably a losing move. There was no need to move the king like that. Now we take, and trying to still infiltrate with his queen. And now we get this other one I mentioned here, creeping in and sort of sneaking into the enemy camp. So that's how this one wins, because there's a couple of really weak squares here, and the pawn as well. And with the queen off on the other side of the board, can't do much about it. So let's see what happens. We move up to H3, guards his E pawn. We move to F3. This really is creeping in, because if we didn't challenge the rook, then the other rook's coming into H3. Okay, queen looks like it might be getting in, but it's too late. Check, check, and that was the end of the game. I think mate's following. Queen H1 check, rook G2, queen H5 check. Well, let's do the mate. Just first of all, we get rid of the queen. Always funny. Best square for the rook. Check. The king's got no escape. It's totally boxed in. Back to G2. Check. Having blocked this square with the rook. Right. So I like that one as a good example of how Blackburne's gun, even if there's nothing on the file, allows you to creep in to the weak squares in the opponent. So these are great games. I mean, I'm just going through a very specific section of them. What I'll do is I'll do another stab at trying to take a PGN and loading up as a Lichess study, or Alekhine's gun or something, right? And then you'll be able to go through these games at your own leisure. However, these games are all famous games, so I don't think you have any problem tracking any of them down. Okay, now this is Alekhine-Nimzo, San Remo, 1930. It's basically the STEM game. It's not the first game, it's the STEM game. It's the game everybody looks back to. I covered this in another video earlier, similar sort of position. And what I want to do is let's just go to the final position and have a look at it and just sort of think about what's going on here. Look at my other video as well if you like. Now, one thing I found is there's several different ending positions. A lot of positions, the last move is actually B5, which is the straw which broke the camel's back. But in this game score I've got that hasn't been played. And basically it's a terrible zugzwang position. So white has just played G3, just rubbing salt in the wounds, right? And now what can black do? The threat is B5. And I think one continuation we've seen was the Queen E8 one. Let me see if I can find it, Queen E8. So now we can do our accounting of who's defended how many times. 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces attacking that knight. But we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces defended. That's okay. What about the rook here? Let's get rid of the color. Rook there. How many times is it defended? So queen's moved back, so it's only defended once and twice. Once and twice. But if the knight moved, you are attacked 1, 2, 3 times. Knight's pinned, B5 wins. So that's the Queen E8 line. Let's try another line which was suggested, which was the King E8 line. Same problem, that B5 will win. In fact, a lot of the computer lines, Knight G5 is also played, because it just puts even more pressure on in the black position. So that's why in this position it's like, what does black do? Those two obvious moves lose. What's another one you could do? You could knight takes d4 is given as the best line, by the way. Also, knight takes b4, just give the knight up, give the piece up, but then your piece down, right? And let's say one more, knight g8. Let's move that knight away, but then of course now the just not protected enough. That's it, game over, right? So this was an amazing zugzwang position. I mean, Nimzo has that other game, Immortal Zugzwang game, but this is an Immortal Zugzwang. And you can see this is the direct pressure on the pin piece. And of course, there's an extra pin in there, and pawns can't move, pieces can't move. So this is, I guess, the classic example of what you expect an Alekhine's gun to look and feel like. Okay, Winter-Alekhine. There you go. But now he's on the black side. Let's have a look at the position. And does it get built? It gets built up here. Done some coloration there. So he's attacking this poor little knight here 3 times. It's defended 1, 2, 3 times at the moment. Okay, that's good. Question is what white can I do? It's not quite zugzwang, but it's pretty bad. So actually gone through lots of different lines. It just play the game line Queen F3. Just going to bring in the extra piece. So you've got to block the extra piece coming in. Oh, guess what? The extra piece comes in anyway. And now it's just curtains because the bishop will drop, which was the extra piece, which was needed to defend the rook, because the other threat is always the knight hopping into g3, which would be attacking the knight again. So if it didn't have enough defense, which it wouldn't be after the bishop gets taken by the other knight, you can see that's just totally tied up. This is so reminiscent of the previous game. So what actually happened? Dropped the bishop back to get it out of the attacking position. We just hopped in there. Takes, check, takes. And that's cleared up the position a lot. But queen's got to move, got to hold on the knight. And now we just come in with a weak square there. This wasn't actually the quickest way of winning, but just creeping in and coming into the white position. Let's see what the quicker way of doing it was. Knight takes e3 check. Take with the rook. Our rook to e3 check was better. Check. It'll attack the rook. Not looking good, is it? In fact, queen to e4 is coming next as well. So this is just terrible position. Beauty line is just move the knight, which is terrible because now you're checking there. Anyway, so you get the idea of this Winter-Alekhine one, which once again, you're creeping in. It's a zigzag position. The defender is really cramped, and this one did have direct pressure and X-ray pressure restricting what white was able to do. Okay, I found one here from Taimanov versus Geller. The position, he sets it up. Taimanov, white sets it up there. So now a lot of pressure down the F file. Queen G4 is one of the moves here. Queen A4 also. Drive the queen away. Queen takes the E pawn. In all these lines, the problem is that the knight is attacking the queen and the rook. Got to take the pawn. Take the pawn. And then now, I might have just, there are different ways of doing it. Takes the rook off. It's fine. We could have taken the knight off the board then. This swaps queens off. Okay, so now, we mentioned earlier on that Karpov and Korchnoi are the two people who played this the most often. So here is their game together with it in it, actually. So let's find out when it was set up. Now, this is Korchnoi, and this is a winning setup. But the knight can't be held. It's a bit of unusual material balance at the moment, by the way. White's already winning, to be honest. It's exchange up. Knight can't be held. Knight has to move. So let's see what's going on. You can see I've highlighted two there. This is just penetrating the black position. Check. And our second rook. We've got rooks on f8 and f6, kind of like dominating the position. Go through a few moves. Black tries to break out. White just improves king position. White improves queen position. Sort of gone now, but you can see that the domination of the c file sort of reinforced White's winning position there. His exchange up, maybe he didn't need to do the Alekhine scan, but that's one of Korchnoi's ones. We've got another one of him later. Now we've got Karpov-Spassky. Now, I think if there's one of these Alekhine games you'd really need to understand, it's this one. Daniel King has a video on this game in particular, because I knew I'd seen something about this game when I saw it. I said, this is a classic, how do you attack the isolated queen pawn? And this is exactly what Karpov is doing against Spassky. When is this? This is Montreal, 1979. Done some markup there. So the d5 pawn is attacked 4 times and it is defended 4 times. But unlike those earlier examples, we can see that there is a pawn break, e4. So more pressure could be applied to the pawn, and therefore the ability to win it exists in this position. So let's see what continuation happened in the rest of the game. Okay, just we're going to spend a couple of moves to make our king safe. Yeah, you see this curl up of the king many games. Yeah, no need to rush. And okay, so now back to full pressure on. And the king side. Make king safe. So there's no random check. There's no check on this diagonal. bishop moves back. And so now the second piece is that the rook, this is the X-ray attack now. The X-ray attack means that the pawn is pinned, so we just advance. It can't be defended enough, and it's pinned, and now we've added a fifth attacker, so it's gone. We just take it. That was an interesting tactic. Before, we should have moved the queen out of that fork, because after this sacrifice, it's an easy win, right, and resigned. So that was the classic case of full frontal pressure on the pinned pawn, and then a lot of indirect pressure on the pieces behind it, defending it. So you're able to add extra pressure with a pawn break and win the game. So there's a Daniel King video on that game. Go and watch it. Okay, 3 more games. I'm not going to look at the Fischer one too much. I don't really understand it, but I think this is a classic sort of. He's done the Roy Lopez, and he's tripled up on the A file, and he breaks through the A file and creeps in through the A file. So that's another sort of example of that. And we've got another Korchnoi game, Korchnoi versus Van Wessel. I thought this is another good example. Okay, so when did we get set up? We've had it for a few moves already. Pressure on the D pawn. D pawn can't move. It's like a Maroczy blind. And got to work out how to. This is actually quite even at the moment. Just improving the position. That's a good move, because now if this pawn is ever in a pinned state, it's not at the moment. I think the rook is defended enough at the moment. Then that pawn will be under pressure. So that's what Korchnoi is angling at. King H8. I can hop the knight in. Now this is a nice tactic. The other guy's cramped. These tactics pop up. If we took it, the queen doesn't have any squares to go to. So what black decides to do, which is a little bit of a mistake, he says, I'll give my queen space by taking the pawn. And now we've reached this position where we've got a lot of pressure on the D pawn, but it's defended enough at the moment. So let's see how we crack through here. Off the dark squares, queen goes back. So queens are off. And now not defended enough. So the bishop protected that pawn, so he couldn't take it. We just pushed the other pawn. Right? Can't take. Now we're a pawn up. You might think, okay, well maybe we can hold. But you just see how cramped black is. White's king's in a better position. Move his bishop to an active square. Extra pawn on the queen side to be pushing, and then eventually wins. So that was a nice sort of use of Alekhine's gun by Korchnoi. Oh, and the last one we're going to cover is another example of where it didn't do much, but since it wasn't a World Chess Championship game, we're going to include it. And easy setup. Okay, here, Carlsen. This game was drawn, and actually the interesting thing is this is towards the end of the match, and Carlsen drew this game. He could have won the game, and I think the reason why is you go back to here, right? You should keep the pressure. I think it's what we've seen in the past. You keep the pressure, you probably get a bigger benefit, because what he did is always cashed in for the extra pawn, and that really didn't help him, right? So you should go b4, knight c3, and moves like that, and gradually build up. So let's see what happens if you release the pressure too quickly. So we've taken the pawn, so now we've got the extra pawn, but it's like blocked, and now three pieces attacking it. Drive the queen away and attack it. So now we're stuck defending it, and it's well blockaded. And how many times it attacked? 4 times. Gets taken. Now it fizzles out. Yep. So just thought that one should be included, because if you Alekhine's gun, apart from those famous Alekhine games and so on, this one will always pop up because it's just reasonably recent, and it was quite interesting. You know, it just shows you that obviously we all learn about this when we're training, and then as I say, it's a pretty rare occurrence. You know, if you play 1,000 games, you might meet it once or twice on either side of the board. So, you know, it's something to be aware of, rather than a specific thing that you'd always be looking to achieve. Okay, so I hope that you found that useful. That sort of little review of Alekhine's gun using Scoutfish, great software to sort of try and capture. There's about 10,000 games, 15,000 games. I mean, a lot more games in there I didn't have a chance to look at. Maybe I'll sort of filter through them in time. So then there's obviously, I picked about 12 of them, which I find quite interesting, to demonstrate this last thing. How does it work? How often? One in a few thousand. How often does it work? Only a little bit better than 50%. direct pressure, X-ray pressure, cramp-like space, many pieces of Irv's judgment and planning in chess. You could have that as a sort of a plan, and then the different ways of implementing it depending upon the particular position. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching.